Greetings, everyone. Well, continuing our look at my ever-growing collection of Conan stuff, or Conan, depending how you prefer to pronounce it. I know Robert E. Howard always pronounced it Conan, and actually wrote it out as a guide to pronunciation as C-O-N', so Conan, but yeah, it seems to interchange. I use both pronunciations. You'll probably notice over the course of these videos. Sometimes I say Conan, sometimes I say Conan. I don't know. Anyway, whatever. Who cares? We're talking about Conan. Today, we talk about the film adaptations of Conan. Last time we talked about the literary origins and some of the comic books. And, well, today we're going to see how Conan has fared on the silver screen over the years. Yeah, definitely some very mixed and somewhat heated opinions on this subject, it seems. Well, for what it's worth, I'll give you my 2 cents. Today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Well, let's not waste any time. You know exactly what I'm going to be talking about, so let's just get them up on the rack here and start talking about them. We have, of course, 1982's Conan the Barbarian, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie that made him, you know, started him off on his meteoric rise to superstardom. 1984's sequel, Conan the Destroyer, co-written by Roy Thomas of Conan comic book fame. Yet for some reason people still don't like it. And then finally, last but most certainly not least, we have 2011's Conan the Barbarian, the completely new, different, unrelated reboot of the film franchise. So, where to begin? I don't know. There's really no sort of gentle way to say this, but I know that a lot of people are huge fans of the Schwarzenegger films. They grew up with the Schwarzenegger films. The Schwarzenegger films were their first experience with Conan. To them, the Schwarzenegger films are the definitive version of Conan. Well, okay, here's my take on that. Are they good films? Hell yeah, they're tons of fun. They're wonderful dark fantasy entertaining films. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them as films. I even like the second one. You know, I know a lot of people slag off the second one. As a kid, I actually like the second one better because the second one is more kind of light in tone. It's more of just a rollicking adventure, you know. I know a lot of people don't like it because it's Conan with a bunch of people, like a bunch of, you know, he has a band of adventurers that he's going on his quest with, and people seem to prefer when he's on his own. And I do agree to some extent that I think Conan is just a lot more badass and, you know, honestly effective a lot of the time when he's on his own. But even in the comics, and well, the comics and the original stories, he does team up with other people from time to time. Hell, sometimes he leads entire armies into battle from time to time. He was a swashbuckling pirate where he had like a whole crew of you know, pirates under his command and stuff like that. So it's not unusual for Conan occasionally to team up with other people to achieve his goals. However, now in my older, wiser, slightly more jaded years, I find I lean more towards the first one because the first one is a lot darker and more serious a story than the second one. So, but I enjoy both of them. I actually think they're both highly entertaining films, and you know. But here's the thing. As wonderful as they are as films, and as entertaining as they are as films, don't kill me, but they're not Conan. They really aren't. Yeah, they really aren't Conan. I mean, I've been reading the original Robert E. Howard stories, and the way that Conan is depicted in these stories really is not the way he's depicted in the books. In some aspects, yes. There's certain things that they take from the books or they adapt from the books, but for the most part, it's not. It's a fantasy adventure story with the Conan name that bears little to no resemblance to the literary origins. For example, right off the top, the very first few scenes where we have Conan as a young boy. In the original stories, we don't know his origins. The only clue we have about his origins from the original stories is not even in one of the published stories. It's actually in a letter that Robert E. Howard wrote in response to a fan who sent him a piece of fan mail, where the fan had asked him, what are the origins of Conan? What's his backstory? And Robert E. Howard, basically all he said about Conan's childhood was that Conan was born on the battlefield, or on a battlefield, whatever. Anyway, he was born on a battlefield, and he only knew blood and fighting all throughout his life. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I forget the exact wording. It's just, I don't have it sitting in front of me, but that was the gist of it. I mean, that's really the only clue that he ever gave as to Conan's origins. And, well, as such, both the old movie and the new movie drew upon that. In this case, we have Conan, we don't really even know, like, the sort of beginnings of it. He's born, and he learns to fight, and then he's a slave, and that's all an invention of the movie. That's entirely an invention of the movie. The whole thing about Conan having this deep emotional attachment to his sword, that's completely an invention of the movie. The original stories, he could give a shit about his sword. A sword's a thing he uses to kill people. That's it. There is no emotional attachment there. There's nothing special about his sword. He just uses whatever sword's on hand. He doesn't care. It's a fucking sword. So, yeah, that whole thing is like, it's not Excalibur that we're watching here. It's supposed to be Conan, and Conan doesn't give a shit about his sword. He just wants to make sure it's sharp and effective and can cut people in half. So, yeah, it's like they took the Excalibur element and added it into Conan for no apparent reason. And ever since this movie, every single visual adaptation, like not the comics. The comics have remained faithful to the stories for the most part, aside from kind of losing their track in the later years apparently. But I haven't got there yet myself, so I can't say from personal experience, only what others have said. But all the film and television adaptations have all had this thing where Conan has this special sword. And that was never in the stories, ever. So this one does it, this one does it, the live-action TV series with Ralph Moeller does it, and the animated series does it, so I don't know why. Yeah, so anyway, what else? There are a few little nods to elements from the original stories that if you're familiar with the original stories you will pick up on, like for example the Tree of Woe. The Tree of Woe is taken almost verbatim out of a story called A Witch is Born, which is one of the, considered one of the big popular original Conan stories. I just read that one I just read a comic book version of it in the Savage Sword of Conan book I have, and then I read the original story. So I've read two versions of that story now, and both of them were excellent. The Savage Sword adaptation was pretty damn accurate, I gotta say. Yeah, so, and then the sort of snake imagery, because I mean, Set is always kind of has a presence in, especially anytime they're around Stygia in the stories. But, I mean, other than that, the villain is just an invention of the movie. Same with the second one. And, yeah. So really, they're fun little adventure romps, but people getting all bent out of shape about this one not being like these movies, get a clue, okay? This is not a remake of this. Yeah, they have the same title. They're both based on the same literary property, but this is not a remake of this. This is a completely different, unrelated film. It's like another adaptation of the same book. It's like saying, again, we get into this frickin' remake thing. I got into the same argument with people about The Thing, 1982 version, not being a remake of the 50s version. It isn't. It's just another adaptation of the same short story. Well, it's the same thing with Conan here. I mean, this is another interpretation of the source material. And quite frankly, this is far more accurate to the original stories than either of these. It just blows the old movies away. Sorry, Arnie fans, but that's the truth. If you read the original stories, this one is way closer. So I really don't get all the hate towards it. The only thing I can conclude is that a lot of people who are hardcore Arnie fanboys and have like some big, deep, nostalgic boner for the old movies just cannot accept the new one, even though it is actually a far more faithful. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say it is the single most faithful adaptation that we've had so far. Is it perfect? No, not by a long stretch. There's still plenty of room for improvement. But hey, that's nothing that a sequel couldn't fix. Basically, all this one does is set up the character and establish the world and such. The story, the plot is almost secondary to that. I mean, it's essentially allowing us to get to know Conan as a character, what type of person he is. We get to see him fighting, we get to see him fucking, we get to see him drinking and wenching it up with, the whores in the bar. That's Conan from the stories. He is not like, the good little boy next door. No, he fights, he fucks, he hangs out with whores, he gets loaded and gets into bar fights, often ending in people getting cleaved in half. He's been a slave, he's been a pirate, he ultimately became fucking king of Aquilonia, got dethroned briefly, and then reclaimed his throne later. This is not a guy you fuck around with. Okay, so Conan you get a little bit of that in the first Conan movie here with Schwarzenegger, but by the second one he's just happy-go-lucky adventurer. I mean, it's just nothing at all like the Conan from the stories. But I mean, by that token, I'm kind of torn because I like the movies. I enjoy them, but they're not faithful to the original stories at all. So you guys, come on, cut the new movie some slack. They are genuinely trying here to give us a film version of Conan that is at least partly accurate to the spirit and lore of the original stories. So my hope is that if we get a sequel, I know Jason Momoa is hella game to do a sequel, at least according to the featurettes on the Blu-ray. There's no reason why they couldn't do some kind of adaptation of one of the lengthier Robert E. Howard stories, and adapt that into a film. That would be fantastic. And a lot of people criticize Jason Momoa's appearance. I gotta say this as well. I've seen a lot of criticism about this, saying like, oh, he doesn't look anything like Conan. It's like, actually, read the fucking stories. He looks almost exactly the way Robert E. Howard describes Conan, like to a T. The only discrepancy being he doesn't have blue eyes. That's it. That's the one thing. Otherwise, he is exactly the way Robert Howard describes Conan. Exactly. Arnie is not the way he describes Conan. Arnie is more like the exaggerated Frank Frazetta magazine covers that had him ridiculously beefed up, just a walking steak of a man. And that's what the Arnie Conan is like. Arnie Conan is like the comic book covers from the lesser years of the comics. He's not like the Conan from the original stories. I mean, the original stories, he's described as muscular. Yeah, he's bulky, sure. But he's toned, he's fit, he's like cut. And he can move. I mean, his movement is described as being very panther-like. He's very fast and agile. And it's not just about swinging a big unwieldy sword around. It's about him being able to go in and just use his hands to rip apart a guy, because he's A, fierce, B, strong as hell, and C, he's known nothing but combat his whole freaking life. And Jason Momoa pulls that off, but he also pulls off the fun side of Conan, but not fun in that, you get cheesy jokes in Conan the Destroyer. No, fun in that Conan likes to hang out in bars and get wasted and, do arm wrestling and stuff with his buddies, and just, his idea of fun is beating the tar out of one of his friends, and then they laugh about it afterwards and get even more drunk. It's just the kind of world he lives in and the kind of civilization he's grown up in and is a part of. So I think Jason Momoa captured that perfectly. The other thing is, I've seen some people say like, oh, Jason Momoa is like half the size of Arnold. It's like, actually no. Arnold was 6'2", and somewhere between 6 foot and 6'2", and 260 pounds when he did Conan. Jason Momoa is 6'4" to 6'5", and weighs in at 230 pounds. So he's actually only about 30 pounds difference. And he's not a bodybuilder. He's, he's a sports guy, obviously. He's very fit and very toned. Arnold is a bodybuilder, so he was all about building muscle mass, whereas Jason Momoa is more about just being cut and fit and toned, But he still has very similar, he's taller, and he's got very similar, pretty darn close in terms of, overall muscle mass. It's just distributed differently, I guess is the best way to describe it. Anyway, can you tell I liked the new Conan movie? I like all three of them. I don't think there's any shame in that. I like all three of them, and I like the original Robert E. Howard stories and the comics. I'm just really enjoying getting to know this character that has eluded me all these years, and enjoying the different interpretations of them. Because the thing is, I think all three of these work as entertaining films. So I don't think there's any reason for fans of one to be slagging off the other. Just don't go saying bullshit like these ones are the definitive Conan. They're not, okay? No matter what your opinion is, these are not the definitive Conan. It's like saying that the 80s cartoon of Ninja Turtles is the definitive adaptation of Ninja Turtles. You damn well know it isn't. But you love it because you grew up with it. And that's fine. But don't go calling it the definitive adaptation of the Turtles. It's like, oh, well, no, see, it's definitive for me personally. It doesn't matter what's definitive for you personally. That's great. It's great that you love it so much that you want to base your whole life around the 80s version of the Ninja Turtles. But it's not the most definitive adaptation. That would be the 2003 version that, fans of the comics love, but fans of the 80s version hate. It's the same fucking thing with Conan, okay? Great. You love the Arnie movies. Arnie forever. Go Arnie. I'm an Arnie fan. I love Arnie's movies. What the hell? I can't be a part of Western civilization growing up in the 80s and not be a fan of Arnie's movies. But to say that that's the definitive Conan? Come on. You know damn well it isn't. And if you go slagging off the original Robert E. Howard stories, I actually saw somebody say, oh, that's just fucking Robert E. Howard fanboys talking. You know that that's not the definitive version of Conan. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, well, considering Robert E. Howard created the character, and then this guy goes on to say, well, then he created a crappy character. It's like, wow, did you just really say that? Oh my God, some people are idiots. So let's quickly go over the Blu-rays in the next edition, because I just realized I've been rambling for 20 minutes. So next time, so I guess that's my take on the movies themselves. I have said absolutely nothing about the Blu-ray presentation, and we're already 20 minutes in. So let's talk about the Blu-rays themselves next time. There are a few issues, especially with this one. These two are pretty good. But yeah, anyway, we'll go over that and the extras and take a closer look at the packaging and all that other good stuff next time. So I guess this is going to be a 4-part Conan special. Yep. Alrighty. Well, that's it from me to you for now. So until next time, thanks for watching, and sayonara.